Imagine a grand, marble-floored courthouse bustling with tension that crackles in the air. On one side stands a glamorous woman cradling a baby, tears threatening to spill from her heavily lined eyes. On the other side, a formidable millionaire, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, stares straight ahead, his gaze locked not on the distraught mistress, but on his pregnant wife, whose expression is an unreadable mask of composure. Secrets, betrayal, and lies loom large within these four walls. This is no ordinary paternity dispute. It's a battle that will shake powerful families and test the boundaries of love, loyalty, and greed. Welcome to the drama of a lifetime. Emerson Stratford was a name that graced glossy magazines and was whispered through the halls of high society. Known for his multi-billion-dollar investment empire, Stratford Global Holdings, Emerson had risen from modest beginnings to become one of the most influential financiers in the country. He was the self-made mogul with a golden touch and an immaculate public image until a few months ago. Just last year, Emerson attended an exclusive tech summit alongside household names like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, proudly announcing a new round of funding for a cutting-edge satellite communications project. It was a crowning moment in his career, reflecting his ability to foresee market trends and invest at the right time. With his taste for impeccably tailored suits, philanthropic endeavors, and that old-world charm, he embodied a modern Gatsby. He was also happily married to the striking Natalia Santander, a former art curator whose refined taste and philanthropic passion had garnered her a well-respected reputation. Together, they were the quintessential power couple, glamorous, wealthy, and seemingly invincible. Their home sat on 10 acres of rolling countryside outside the bustling city, boasting a modern estate that blended sleek glass structures with carefully manicured gardens. Inside that estate, life ran with near-military precision. Caterers, maids, and security staff dotted the property like chess pieces on a well-organized board. Natalia had just discovered she was pregnant, news that spread elation through the staff and immediate circle of friends. Everyone expected that this baby would fortify the Stratford legacy for generations. But beneath the polished veneer of perfection lurked shadows, whispers of clandestine meetings, suspicious credit card charges, and a certain name that had begun to float through exclusive social gatherings: Marisol Hernandez. The rumor mill churned that Emerson had been seen more than once at upscale lounges and hotel bars in the city, always in the company of a statuesque brunette whose presence seemed anything but platonic. These were not just small whispers, but rumblings that threatened to tear the entire Stratford kingdom down. Natalia, despite her calm exterior, had a knot of dread tightening in her stomach each passing day. She trusted Emerson, or wanted to, yet she couldn't ignore the hush-hush gossip. The staff sensed the tension. Her personal assistant asked gentle, probing questions about whether everything was all right. Her driver noticed how tense her posture became each time they passed the city's glittering nightlife district. Emerson, on his part, assured Natalia that everything was fine, chalking up rumors to the public's fascination with powerful men. But behind his confident smile, a storm brewed, and both of them were about to face it. Such was their situation, a gilded life with hidden cracks, a fortress waiting for a single well-placed blow to crumble into scandal. Little did they know how close that blow was and how devastating it would be. The name Marisol Hernandez kept reappearing in Natalia's circle. One evening, over a lavish dinner at the exclusive Regal Harbor Club, a concerned friend leaned toward her and murmured, "Natalia, you know I would never want to hurt you. But we all heard about Marisol Hernandez. Is there any truth to it?" She tried to sound casual, but the worried crease on her forehead betrayed her concern. Natalia felt a flicker of anger surge through her. Marisol, who she asked, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She prayed her tone suggested disinterest, even though her heart hammered loudly in her chest. Her friend looked at her with pity, as if Natalia were the last person in the room to realize her own predicament. "Maybe it's nothing," she said, backtracking. "Just silly rumors." Yet the words lingered between them, heavy with implication. Later that night, Natalia confronted Emerson in their gilded master suite. Above them hung an original painting by a renowned modern artist, an abstract swirl of blues, golds, and angry reds. It seemed to echo the turmoil Natalia felt inside. "Who is Marisol Hernandez?" she asked bluntly, trying to steady her trembling voice. She stood by the window, arms crossed protectively over her stomach, which had just started showing a subtle curve. The baby inside her was the reason she was fighting so fiercely to preserve their life together. Emerson paused, loosening his tie with a hint of irritation. "Why does that name matter?" he countered. "You know how these social circles feed on innuendo. Ever since we announced your pregnancy, tongues have been wagging about everything from how I run my business to who I might be meeting over lunch. It's absurd." His dismissive tone both relieved and frustrated her. She wanted more than simply, "It's absurd." She wanted clarity. "Emerson, I just want the truth. Are you having an affair?" The question was out before she could second-guess it, and the tears pooled in her eyes before she could blink them away. He sighed, stepping toward her with arms outstretched. "Come here," he whispered, pulling her gently into his arms. "I love you. I want our family. I would never do that to you." His voice was calm, practiced, like someone who'd soothed many anxious investors with winning words. She let herself believe him, if only to protect her still fragile sense of security. All seemed well for a moment. Yet late into that night, Natalia lay awake staring at the ceiling as moonlight streamed through the expensive drapes. A nagging sense of unease crept in, fueled by the memory of countless half-smiles and side glances at social events. The name Marisol haunted her mind. If it was nothing, why was everyone talking about it? Natalia tried to quell her concerns for the sake of her unborn child. She forced herself to trust Emerson's words. But trust is fragile, and what followed would shatter it irreparably. Exactly 2 weeks after that tense conversation, the first blow landed on their doorstep in the form of a thick envelope addressed to Emerson. It was delivered by a no-nonsense courier in a plain black suit who demanded a direct signature. The staff, unsure of the contents, passed it to Emerson the moment he returned from a corporate lunch meeting. Inside was a summons to appear in court. Natalia only learned about it when she discovered the letter in Emerson's study, half hidden beneath a pile of unread business documents. Reading the legal jargon, she felt her heart drop to her stomach. Paternity suit, filed by Ms. Marisol Hernandez. The words practically jumped off the page like barbed hooks tearing at her illusions. She confronted Emerson the moment he walked into the study that evening, brandishing the summons like a weapon. "What is this?" she hissed. A swirl of emotions, betrayal, hurt, fury, darkened her usually composed features. Her voice trembled, but a certain steel laced her tone. Behind her, the golden glow of a late sunset cast long shadows, heightening the drama in the spacious room. Emerson looked stricken for a brief second. For the first time since Natalia had met him, he appeared truly shaken. The color drained from his face, and his polished demeanor faltered. "Nat, I can explain," he murmured. That one phrase told her all she needed to know. He had lied. Natalia erupted. "Explain? So you do know Marisol?" There is a baby. Why did you lie to me? Each question spewed out like a bullet, her voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. Emerson closed his eyes, inhaling deeply as he tried to gather himself. I never wanted this to happen, he began, his voice raw. I had a lapse in judgment. One mistake. I ended it months ago, but she says the baby is mine. And now she's suing me for paternity and child support. You told me nothing was going on, Natalia said, tears streaming down her face. You made me look like a fool, especially now that I'm pregnant with our child. His gaze flickered with shame. I was scared. I hoped she'd disappear, that the rumors would die down. I didn't think she'd go this far. I'm sorry. But sorry felt hollow. All Natalia could see was the ruin of the life she had tried so carefully to believe in, her marriage reduced to illusions. She clutched her stomach, acutely aware of the new life growing inside her. The heartbreak of discovering she wasn't Emerson's only priority was devastating. Still, a part of her clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this child wasn't his. Perhaps Marisol was lying for money. Perhaps it was a scam they could verify with a paternity test, right? Yet the hardest pill to swallow was that Emerson hadn't been honest, and secrets once revealed tend to devour everything in their path. Anger seethed through Natalia's every nerve, but she knew this went beyond a personal betrayal. A full-blown scandal threatened Emerson's empire and, by extension, threatened her unborn child's future. She retreated to a smaller sitting room, away from the staff's curious glances, to speak with Emerson privately. He paced the room, raking a hand through his perfectly styled hair until it stuck out in messy strands. Marisol was someone I met at a charity gala, he confessed, staring at the ground, as though he couldn't bear to look at Natalia. She was persistent, and I was weak. It happened once, maybe twice. It was a mistake. Natalia stifled a sob, not wanting the staff or the world to see her crumble. Instead, she kept her chin raised, voice steady. If it's yours, we'll know soon enough. There will be a DNA test. I don't know how we'll handle this, but you have an obligation. I don't want our child to grow up hating their half-sibling, if indeed this baby is related. A flicker of hope lit in Emerson's eyes. The fact that she was already considering the child's best interest, rather than shutting him out completely, gave him room to breathe. Natalia, I want to fix this, he said, stepping closer. I want you. I want our family. Please let me handle it. But how exactly do you handle a situation so dire, so public? The lawsuit demanded a paternity test and a substantial amount of child support if proven true. For Marisol, it was an all-or-nothing approach. She was done with backdoor negotiations and hush money. She wanted her baby recognized. Perhaps behind the tabloid sensationalism, there was a woman who felt betrayed and alone, demanding justice for her child. In the midst of that emotional storm, Natalia found herself grappling with the immediate needs of her own pregnancy. The stress was overwhelming. Her doctor had warned her early in the pregnancy to keep calm, avoid high levels of anxiety, anything that might affect her blood pressure or cause complications. Yet here she was, living a nightmare. Despite the swirl of chaos, a kernel of strength anchored her. She had grown up in a family that had faced hardships before, financial woes, internal disputes, and had learned resilience at a young age. She would lean on that resilience again. They decided to keep the news within a tight circle, just the two of them and Emerson's legal team, until the official court date. The media had not yet caught wind, but the rumor mills in high society were in overdrive. A few tabloids hinted at an unknown mistress with a baby, linking it to an unnamed businessman. Insiders suspected it was Emerson, but without solid proof. They couldn't run the story at full tilt yet. Natalia believed that if they kept a low profile, they might handle this quietly. But as the weeks wore on, Marisol's strategy became crystal clear. She didn't merely want a quiet settlement, she wanted recognition. She filed public motions, each more sensational than the last, painting a portrait of Emerson as a callous, unfaithful man who refused responsibility for his child. The tabloids seized upon the details, and soon Natalia found her own name dragged into the headlines, the betrayed wife. With the court date looming, the entire fiasco threatened to explode in public view. And in the darkest corners of Natalia's mind, a question lingered. If Emerson was lying, then could he still be lying? The day before the preliminary hearing, Marisol Hernandez herself decided to break the silence, granting an exclusive interview to an internet tabloid known for sensational celebrity scandals. The clip quickly spread across social media, and by nightfall, it was all anyone could talk about. In the interview, Marisol appeared poised, yet visibly distressed, her dark hair styled in cascading waves, her cheeks slightly hollowed by stress. She held her baby, whose name was stated as Thomas, in her arms, occasionally bouncing him gently to soothe his fussing. She spoke about meeting Emerson Stratford at a black-tie charity event 6 months prior. She claimed that they had an immediate connection, that Emerson had been lost in his marriage, and that he pursued her with grand gestures, private dinners at exclusive restaurants, expensive gifts delivered to her tiny apartment, heartfelt promises of a future that would soon unravel. She then offered proof in the form of screenshots of text messages, allegedly from Emerson, romantic overtures, and affectionate words complete with photos of him at his office. Though the authenticity of these messages was still in question to the public eye, it was damning. Marisol concluded her interview with tears staining her cheeks. "I'm not here to destroy his marriage. I just want what's fair for my child. Thomas deserves his father, and if Emerson won't take responsibility willingly, the court will make him." Suddenly, Marisol was no longer just a rumor. She was a real person, with a face, a voice, and a baby in her arms, an innocent child caught in a vicious crossfire. Public opinion, which had briefly waffled in defense of Emerson, after all, he was a well-known philanthropist, shifted dramatically. They now saw a single mother, heartbreakingly vulnerable, pitted against a powerful man who had on the surface chosen to hide behind wealth and influence. That evening, Natalia watched the interview on her iPad, huddled in bed. She felt nauseous tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She sensed a wave of sympathy for Marisol, which tore at her from inside. It felt as if the entire world had turned against her husband, labeling him a cheater and a deadbeat father. And while she had every reason to be furious at him herself, there was also a flicker of empathy for him. Emerson was her husband, and she knew him better than the tabloids did. Even in betrayal, she couldn't reconcile the man she loved with the heartless cad painted on the screen. Across the room, Emerson stared at his phone, reading a torrent of messages from his publicist attorneys and old friends. Accusations and sensational headlines thrived. The board of Stratford Global Holdings was furious about the negative press, worried it would scare investors. Their fortune might withstand a scandal, but their reputations and that intangible currency of trust were at risk of collapsing. Natalia set the iPad aside and looked at Emerson. "Did you send those texts?" she asked, in a voice barely above a whisper. He rubbed a hand across his forehead. I sent some messages. Not exactly like that, but yes, I made mistakes. She's twisting the context, though. She was the one always texting, always pushing. I never promised her anything long-term. I never wanted a relationship." She sighed, feeling that painful mix of anger and pity once again. She's painting you as if you did. Doesn't matter what the truth is, the public already thinks you're guilty. And tomorrow, you'll have to face her in court. Emerson nodded, looking more human than ever vulnerable, apologetic. For a moment, Natalia caught a glimpse of the man she'd married, the ambitious dreamer, the one who was fiercely devoted to her in the early years. A pang of nostalgia and hurt pierced her heart. She was pregnant, anxious, and at odds with a woman she had never met, a woman claiming to share motherhood with her courtesy of Emerson. Tomorrow, the court hearing would force them all into the same room, and the stage was set for a collision that would resonate far beyond the marble corridors of the courthouse. Courtroom 7C of the downtown courthouse was packed. Spectators, press, and onlookers crammed into the rows of benches, eager for a glimpse of one of the year's most sensational paternity suits. The ceiling was high and ornate, its murals depicting scenes of justice overshadowed by the raw tension in the air. On the left side, Emerson Stratford sat with his high-powered legal team. He wore a charcoal grey suit, his expression stoic, but those closest to him could see the faint lines of stress etched around his eyes and mouth. Next to him, Natalia, visibly pregnant, her slender figure replaced by the gentle swell at her midsection, sat with her own quiet dignity. She wore a conservative but elegant black dress, her hair pulled back in a low chignon, as if she refused to allow spectacle to overshadow her presence. More than anything, she wanted to witness the truth come out, no matter how painful it might be. On the right side, Marisol Hernandez sat cradling baby Thomas in her arms. She had a sympathetic face, soft features, and wide eyes that gleamed with tears. Her attorney, a passionate women's rights advocate, made it clear that they were there to ensure Thomas received recognition and support. Periodically, Marisol glanced over at Emerson, her gaze equal parts longing and resentment. When the judge, an older man with a reputation for fairness, took the bench, the room fell silent. He skimmed through the paperwork, then cleared his throat. "We're here to address matters related to the paternity of Thomas Hernandez and the plaintiff's request for child support and acknowledgement. Let's proceed with the preliminary arguments." Marisol's attorney spoke first, weaving a narrative of a woman wronged. Marisol has come forward in good faith. She has provided evidence of a relationship with Mr. Stratford, and we have reason to believe he is the father of her child. We request an expedited DNA test and immediate financial support for necessary child-rearing costs. Next, Emerson's lead counsel, a steely-eyed litigator named Marion Kingsley, rose. "We do not deny that Ms. Hernandez and Mr. Stratford were acquainted. However, we contest the child's paternity and demand a court-supervised DNA test. Until the results are conclusively established, any interim support remains premature." The judge nodded. "In these cases, a DNA test is standard procedure. We will order it. Once we have the results, we can address child support." At that moment, Marisol stood up, surprising her own attorney by taking the floor. With baby Thomas in one arm, she pointed her free hand at Emerson. "I'm not here for money alone. I'm here because you made promises you never intended to keep. My baby deserves a father, one who doesn't treat him like a secret or an inconvenience." Emerson's jaw tensed. "I acknowledge I was involved with you," he said softly, his voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. "I never intended to hurt anyone, but I have to be certain Thomas is my son." A swirl of murmurs erupted among the onlookers. Some glared at Emerson with disapproval, while others glanced sympathetically at Natalia, who sat still as stone, her hands folded over her swollen belly. Marisol's voice cracked with emotion. "You promised me the world, Emerson. You made me believe this child was wanted. And now, you act like we're strangers." Tears trailed down her cheeks. For a moment, it was impossible to tell if it was a performance or genuine heartbreak. Maybe it was both. It was in that moment of high drama, a mistress holding up her baby for the entire court to see, that the media photographers snapped their most sensational shots, the mother in tears, the crying infant, and the millionaire father refusing to meet her eyes, focusing only on the pregnant wife sitting by his side. That single still image posted online minutes later would ignite 1,000 think pieces on betrayal, scandal, and wealth. And in every one, Natalia was there in the background, an enigma of grace and sorrow overshadowed by the wail of a baby that might or might not be her husband's flesh and blood. As soon as the court session ended, the media closed in like a pack of wolves. Shouts of Mr. Stratford, "Do you admit to fathering the child?" and Mrs. Stratford, "How do you feel about your husband's affair?" bombarded them. Security scrambled to keep the crowd back, while Emerson and Natalia moved to the black SUV idling outside. Natalia felt suffocated by the flashing cameras and outstretched microphones. All she wanted was to get home, shut the door, and try to breathe. She kept her head down, refusing to answer any questions. Her silence only fueled the frenzy, fueling speculation that she was either in denial or secretly enraged. The tabloids would run wild with their own narratives soon enough. Once inside the car, Emerson reached out for her hand. She hesitated, then let his fingers intertwine with hers. In that moment, she recalled the vow they had made in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. This certainly qualified as the worst part. She hated him for betraying her, but part of her still longed for the man she believed he could be, the man she once trusted implicitly. It's just a few more weeks until the DNA test confirms everything, Emerson muttered, as if reciting a mantra to calm himself. Then we can decide what comes next. Natalia stared out the window, watching city lights blur past. The car sped through traffic, heading toward the sanctuary of their estate. But she knew there was no real escape from the scandal. The news was already viral. No matter how sophisticated their security, the press would continue prying into their lives, especially now that an adorable baby was involved. "Emerson," she began softly, "what if the child is yours?" He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing above the crisp collar of his shirt. "Then, we'll do what's right. I won't abandon my child, but I can't abandon you either, or the baby we're having." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes at the complexity of it all. They were about to be parents, potentially, to 2 babies. The future she had dreamed of, a snug family of 3, with quiet nights reading by the fireplace, was colliding with a new reality that included a mistress, a second child, and a humiliating media circus. By the time they arrived at the estate, Natalia felt drained. She retreated to her bedroom, noticing how every staff member's eyes flickered with curiosity or pity. She locked the door behind her, sank onto the bed, and let the tears flow. She cried for herself, for her unborn child, for the heartbreak that had shattered her marriage. Outside, night enveloped the mansion, thick with unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Marisol retreated to her own small apartment on the other side of the town. She tucked baby Thomas into a second-hand crib and sank onto a futon, exhaustion lining her features. Regardless of how she was portrayed, she believed she was fighting for her son's future. Her phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, some vicious, calling her a gold digger. She scrolled through news sites featuring her tearful face in the courthouse, analyzing how it might affect public sympathy. A wave of loneliness washed over her. She was a single mother, embroiled in a battle with one of the most powerful men in the country. Right or wrong, she felt she had little choice but to fight. Somewhere in the city lines were drawn. Emerson, Natalia, and Marisol were entangled in a web of heartbreak and ambition with two innocent babies, one already here, one on the way at the epicenter. Each adult fought for security, justice, love, or simply peace. As the next court date approached, the tension only escalated. Everyone wanted a resolution. No one wanted to face what it might cost. In the weeks leading up to the DNA test, both camps sought to strengthen their positions. Emerson's legal team worked tirelessly to gather any evidence that might undermine Marisol's credibility. They questioned her background, finances, and even her dating history, hoping to find a pattern that would point to a possible paternity con. Meanwhile, Marisol's attorney rallied women's advocacy groups to her cause, painting her as an underdog taking on a monolithic corporate titan. Enter Phoebe Locke, a high-profile society columnist with a penchant for scandal. She was known to have exclusive sources in every corner of the elite world house, staff, corporate insiders, and even disgruntled ex-lovers. One morning, a salacious piece published under her byline stated that Emerson Stratford had allegedly paid for Marisol's upscale apartment and a new car, fueling speculation he had more than a fleeting affair. Emerson was livid when he read the article. "That's false," he insisted to Natalia over breakfast. "I never paid for her apartment or car. She must have had some other sponsor or saved her own money." Still, the damage was done. Public perception veered further against him. Natalia, fighting her own emotional battles, made a decision she needed to bolster Emerson's image or risk losing everything they had built. She quietly reached out to an old acquaintance, Julia Weinstein, a skilled PR consultant, known for steering celebrities and CEOs out of hot water controversies. Natalia and Julia had crossed paths in the art world, where Julia curated events and built brand images for philanthropic galas. Now, Natalia needed her expertise to manage the crisis swirling around her husband. Julia agreed to come aboard, cautioning, "This is going to be messy. We'll need a multifaceted approach: philanthropy, public interviews, endorsements from respected figures. If this baby is yours," she said pointedly to Emerson, "you'll need to show responsibility in a way that doesn't vilify the mother. If it's not, you'll need hard evidence to stop these allegations cold." The next day, while meeting with Julia in Emerson's office, Natalia watched as business associates contacted him with growing unease. Some threatened to sever ties if negative publicity continued. Others were sympathetic, but warned they had shareholders to please. Emerson displayed a stoic front, but Natalia could see cracks forming in his composure. The man who once thrived on confidence and vision was reeling from the potential collapse of his professional standing and possibly his marriage. Meanwhile, Marisol found an unlikely ally in a social worker named Carmen Diaz, who worked at a local women's center. Concerned about Marisol's financial stress, Carmen offered legal support, emotional counseling, and a place to stay if things ever got rough. Though Marisol wasn't destitute, she had some savings. She appreciated the moral support. Carmen believed her story, believed that a woman shouldn't be left alone with a baby while the father lived in a palatial estate. Marisol, swayed by Carmen's compassion, felt more resolute than ever. She wouldn't settle for hush money or silent recognition. She wanted the father of her child to be publicly accountable. Yet beneath Marisol's determination lay a twinge of guilt. She'd once truly believed Emerson might leave Natalia for her. But as she saw him with Natalia in court, supporting his pregnant wife without glancing her way, she recognized the depth of her own naivety. Anger and heartbreak co-mingled inside her, fueling her fight for Thomas's recognition. All the while, tabloids documented each move, each statement, each rumor. The storyline had become a national obsession: Millionaire's mistress versus the loyal wife. No matter how each side spun it, the heartbreak and the underlying tragedy were evident to anyone who looked deeper. A small child was caught in this maelstrom, and another child was on the way. The stakes could not be higher. The day the DNA results arrived was as ordinary as any other, a bright, sunny morning that belied the tension weighing on everyone involved. Emerson had just entered a conference call when his lawyer phoned, summoning him to the law firm's office. Natalia insisted on accompanying him. She needed to know once and for all if her unborn baby's half-sibling was real. They entered the sleek, high-rise building that housed Kingsley and Associates. The law firm's decor was a testament to power and affluence: mahogany tables, leather-bound legal volumes, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Tense silence filled the corridor as they were led to a private conference room. Inside, Marion Kingsley waited with a sealed envelope. Marisol and her attorney arrived moments later, baby Thomas in tow. Natalia found herself glancing at the infant's face, tender, delicate eyes, big and bright. She couldn't help but wonder if those features bore any resemblance to Emerson. No one spoke. Marion opened the envelope with a letter opener, the rip of paper amplified by the stillness. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Marion skimmed the contents, eyes flickering with an emotion that was impossible to read. Then she delivered the news with clinical detachment. The tests confirm a 99.9% probability that Emerson Stratford is the biological father of Thomas Hernandez. Marisol exhaled a shaky breath. Relief mingled with triumph. Tears of vindication welled in her eyes. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Emerson blanched, his jaw tightening as he struggled to maintain composure. Natalia felt the final blow of heartbreak. She closed her eyes momentarily, letting the truth settle like an anchor in her chest. Baby Thomas began fussing, perhaps sensing the intensity in the room. Marisol rocked him gently, pressing a kiss to his forehead, as if to say, "It's going to be okay now." In that moment, Natalia had an odd realization: this was not the baby's fault. He was as much a victim of circumstance as she was. Marion Kingsley, ever the professional, continued, "We'll need to discuss child support arrangements and paternal rights. Ms. Hernandez, your attorney can coordinate with our team to formalize an agreement." Marisol's attorney nodded, giving Emerson a steely glance. "We'll expect a substantial offer to cover Thomas's living expenses, education, and health needs." Emerson's face was ashen. He spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, "We'll figure it out." He stood then, and Natalia followed, not sparing Marisol a look. Outside, in the hallway, the gravity of the situation pressed down on them. "It's true," Natalia whispered, leaning against a wall for support. She felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Their marriage would never be the same. Emerson gently placed a hand on her shoulder, but she pulled away. She wasn't ready to let him console her, not when he had caused this monumental upheaval in their lives. In that moment, Emerson glimpsed the immense gulf that had opened between them. He reached for her again, but she was already walking away, her hand protectively over her belly. The look on her face was not one of rage, it was far more devastating. It was resignation, and it scared Emerson more than any legal battle he could ever face. In the days following the DNA revelation, negotiations between Marisol's camp and Emerson's lawyers commenced. Discussions centered on child support, medical insurance, future educational funds, tangibles that lawyers could argue in dollar figures. Yet no legal document could mend the emotional rifts. Natalia stayed mostly in her personal suite, avoiding contact with Emerson unless absolutely necessary. The baby in her belly continued to grow, reminding her daily that she had a life within her to protect from the chaos outside. She read books on pregnancy and newborn care, hoping to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But her mind often drifted to Marisol and little Thomas. Would she be able to accept this child in their lives? The question tormented her, overshadowing the excitement she once had for her own pregnancy. One evening, as sunset dyed the sky in streaks of pink and orange, Emerson knocked softly on Natalia's door. When she opened it, she saw a weariness in his eyes that mirrored her own. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice heavy with remorse. She nodded, stepping aside so he could enter. They sat on opposite ends of a velvet chaise, an invisible canyon between them. He finally broke the silence. "I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I want to fight for us, for our baby. I love you." Natalia's eyes flickered with pain. "If you loved me, why did you betray me?" Emerson ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "I was stupid, selfish. I was flattered by Marisol's attention, and I felt unstoppable. It was never love. But I can't change the fact that Thomas is my son." She pressed her lips together. "So what do we do now? Are you going to be a father to him? Bring him around on weekends like a distant uncle? Or will you be part of his life every day? And how does that leave us?" He lowered his head. "I have to be involved somehow. I can't abandon him. But you are my wife, Natalia. I want us to raise our child together. I want to earn back your trust." Tears formed at the corners of her eyes. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it's never the same. "I'm not saying it's impossible, but it will take time, so much time to heal. Right now, I need space to breathe." Emerson nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Take all the space you need," he whispered. "Just know I'm here. I'm not giving up on us." After he left, Natalia buried her face in her hands and sobbed. She wasn't certain if their marriage could be saved, or even if she truly wanted to save it. The only thing she knew was that she couldn't make that decision out of anger alone. Meanwhile, across town, Marisol studied the proposed settlement from Emerson's lawyers. It included a generous monthly stipend, a trust fund for Thomas, and coverage of medical and educational expenses. Her attorney found it fair, but Marisol lingered on a clause that limited her public statements about the affair. "Is this hush money?" she asked, her brow creasing. Her lawyer explained that it was standard in high-profile cases designed to protect the child's privacy as well as the father's reputation. Marisol considered it carefully. While she wanted financial security for Thomas, she balked at signing away her right to speak about the circumstances that had led to her pregnancy. If Emerson planned to be involved, shouldn't the truth be acknowledged openly? She stared at Thomas, sleeping peacefully in his crib, a swirl of emotions flooding her chest. She remembered how, during her affair with Emerson, he made her feel special, like the center of his universe, if only briefly. Now that universe was crumbling. She realized the illusions she'd cherished were exactly that, illusions, and she'd been left as a single mother with an uncertain future. Yet ironically, she stood to gain a secure life for her son, something she'd never had growing up. The question was whether she wanted to fully align with Emerson's conditions or maintain her independence. The next major court date centered on finalizing the paternity-related settlement. With the DNA evidence confirmed, Emerson had no grounds to contest fatherhood, so the hearing was largely procedural. Still, the public and media remained ravenous for updates. Photographers lined the courthouse steps, capturing each tense moment. When Emerson arrived with Natalia, cameras flashed incessantly. Observers noted how Natalia walked a step behind him, her face set in grim determination. They also noticed the protective hand Emerson placed on her lower back, an old habit from happier days. Whether this was a sign of unity or a mere facade was anyone's guess. Marisol, on the other hand, carried Thomas in her arms, flanked by her attorney. She had discarded her earlier timid demeanor, appearing more resolute and confident. She wore a modest yet stylish suit, projecting the image of a responsible mother rather than a scandalous mistress. The media lapped it up. Public sentiment showed a surge of empathy for this single mom, especially in light of Emerson's confirmed paternity. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed the settlement agreement. After hearing brief arguments, he declared it equitable, ensuring Thomas's future would be well provided for. However, the judge left open the question of custody arrangements. Emerson had legal rights to see his son, but the logistics were still a point of contention. Would Marisol allow regular visitation, or was she open to joint custody? The room tensed as these discussions came to a head. Emerson's voice was measured, though a vein in his temple pulsed with stress. "I want to be in my son's life," he declared. "I'm willing to schedule visits to ensure he knows who his father is." Marisol looked at him, her expression unreadable. She was silent for a long moment before responding. "I won't deny Thomas a chance to know his father, but I want to make sure he's protected, not passed around like an obligation." Natalia stood quietly on the sidelines, her stomach an ever-present reminder that she too was carrying Emerson's child. She couldn't help but feel a deep ache at the realization that Emerson was asking to raise, or at least be a part, of Marisol's child's life, a child conceived in betrayal. Ultimately, they reached a tentative agreement. Emerson would have scheduled visitations, supervised initially, to ensure stability. Should the arrangement prove beneficial for Thomas, they could move to more flexible co-parenting terms in the future. When the hearing ended, the media frenzy reignited outside. Emerson offered a brief statement: "I accept responsibility for my son, and I'm committed to providing for him. I ask for privacy during this time as my family, and I focus on healing." He glanced at Natalia, who remained silent at his side. Marisol then stepped forward, baby Thomas in her arms, addressing the cameras with surprising composure. "All I want is the best for Thomas. I hope Mr. Stratford will uphold his promise to be a good father." The snapshots that flooded social media and news sites later that day were heart-wrenching. Marisol holding her baby close, tears glistening in her eyes, while Emerson stood at a distance with Natalia, who gazed off into space. The headlines read, "The mistress's baby triumphant," but what about the wife's unborn child? Weeks passed marked by a sense of uneasy calm. Legalities had been addressed. Thomas was legally recognized as Emerson's son, and a structured child support plan was in place. Yet life outside the courtroom was where the real drama began, and healing, if it was possible at all. Emerson moved into a separate wing of the massive estate, giving Natalia the time and space she needed. Their interactions were polite but cautious, like strangers who knew they shared a complicated history. Emerson threw himself into his work, attending back-to-back board meetings, orchestrating new deals, and traveling to maintain investor confidence. During these business trips, he also discreetly visited Thomas, trying to form a bond with the infant who shared his DNA. The first time he held his son outside a clinical environment, tears pricked his eyes. He felt both guilty and awed by the small life he had helped create. Marisol, meanwhile, settled into a new routine. She used part of the settlement to move to a safer neighborhood, enrolling in night classes to eventually earn her degree. She was determined to not just rely on Emerson's money, but to create a stable future for herself and Thomas. Though she had once fantasized about being a permanent part of Emerson's life, those illusions were long gone. Her focus now was on motherhood independence and protecting Thomas's emotional well-being as he grew. Natalia spent her days preparing for the arrival of her baby. She decorated a nursery in a soft palette of creams and sage greens, choosing calming hues to counter the internal chaos she felt. She avoided public events focusing on her health. In rare moments, she found solace in quiet walks through the estate gardens where the chatter of the staff and the glare of cameras couldn't reach her. Still, she was haunted by what-ifs. Could she and Emerson ever rebuild trust? Did she even want to in a move toward transparency or perhaps redemption? Emerson scheduled a televised interview with a reputable journalist, aiming to address the scandal once and for all. Natalia watched from home, her heart pounding. In the interview, Emerson admitted to his affair, expressed regret, and affirmed his commitment to supporting Thomas. When asked about his marriage, he said, "Natalia is the love of my life. I can only hope she finds it in her heart to forgive me." The interviewer pressed for details, but Emerson maintained respect for Natalia's privacy. His humility seemed genuine, but was it enough? The interview's aftermath brought mixed reactions. Some praised Emerson for taking responsibility. Others called him a master manipulator trying to salvage his image. Natalia couldn't help but feel both relieved that the narrative was shifting and yet resentful that her husband was controlling the public story. She was the one left, with the shards of betrayal, the one forced to navigate pregnancy amid scandal. One night, after reading a pregnancy guide under the soft glow of a bedside lamp, Natalia felt a sudden pang. She winced, placing a hand on her belly, realizing she'd experienced her first contraction-like cramp. Fear spiked through her. Was it too soon? She was only 7 months along. Anxiety soared. She curled up on her bed, tears pricking her eyes. Stress is dangerous for a pregnancy, the doctor had warned, and she'd been living on the edge for months. The clock ticked, echoing the tension in her chest. She knew that any medical emergency would thrust her back into Emerson's arms, if only out of necessity. But was that what she truly wanted? Or was there another path forward, one that might lead to healing? But perhaps apart from him, only time and the impending arrival of her baby would tell. 2 weeks before her due date, Natalia jolted awake, pain searing through her abdomen. Labor had started early. She gritted her teeth and reached for her phone with trembling fingers, calling Emerson. He burst into her room minutes later, panic written across his face. "Hospital," she gasped, clutching her belly. Without hesitation, he carried her to the car. The ride was a blur of contractions, shallow breaths, and whispered reassurances. At the hospital, doctors confirmed early labor, but not dangerously so. Emerson refused to leave her side. He held her hand through every contraction, wiped her tears, and whispered that everything would be okay. Hours later, a cry pierced the air. Their daughter had arrived. Natalia, exhausted and teary-eyed, held her baby for the first time. In that moment, all the scandal, the betrayal, the courtroom drama, everything faded. She looked at Emerson, who stood speechless, tears slipping down his cheeks. For a fleeting instant, they weren't a fractured couple. They were parents welcoming new life. Later, as Natalia rested, Emerson stepped into the hallway to make phone calls. She watched him through the glass, wondering what kind of father he'd be. Then she turned to her daughter and smiled softly. This baby, this moment, gave her clarity. She didn't need to decide the future of her marriage tonight, but she could choose love for her child and maybe someday for herself again. When Emerson returned, she offered a small, tentative smile. "Come meet your daughter," she said gently. And just like that, in a quiet hospital room, they chose hope fragile, uncertain, but real. News of Natalia's early labor exploded across headlines. Millionaire's wife gives birth amid ongoing scandal. Paparazzi camped outside the hospital, snapping photos of Emerson Natalia's parents, and 2 days later, even Marisol. Marisol's visit was quiet and unexpected. Holding baby Thomas, she found Natalia's room and hesitated at the door. Emerson wasn't there. Just two women, two mothers facing each other without judges or lawyers. "I heard you had the baby," Marisol said softly. "Congratulations." Her eyes fell on the sleeping infant full of quiet wonder. "Thank you," Natalia replied, voice guarded but calm. "He's grown," she said, nodding toward Thomas. Marisol nodded. "I'm sorry for everything. We both got hurt in different ways." Natalia's throat tightened. Looking at Thomas, her husband's child, still stung. But she saw something familiar in Marisol's eyes, a mother's love. "Our children share blood. That has to matter." "I don't want to be your enemy," Marisol said. "They deserve to know each other someday." Natalia exhaled slowly. "I don't know how, but maybe." Yes. A fragile understanding settled between them. Marisol kissed Thomas's head and left quietly. When Emerson returned, Natalia told him about the visit. He looked surprised but relieved. "Maybe this is a step forward," he murmured. Natalia didn't respond immediately. She looked at her newborn and thought of Thomas. Two children tied by one man's choices. Maybe they could rise above the scandal for their sake. That night, as cameras clicked and speculation swirled, Natalia felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe acceptance. And with that, a path forward blurred, uncertain, but no longer blocked entirely. In the weeks following Victoria's birth, Natalia poured herself into motherhood. She called her newborn daughter Tori, soft, simple hers. Emerson took fewer work trips, showing up for late-night feedings and diaper changes, trying to regain Natalia's trust through action. Though the betrayal still lingered, Natalia couldn't deny the sincerity in his eyes when he rocked their daughter to sleep. Therapy sessions remained difficult, filled with raw confessions and unresolved pain. But they were trying. Emerson also made time for Thomas. At first, Marisol insisted on supervised visits, but slowly she began to trust him. Thomas responded with bright eyes and soft coos, especially when Emerson spoke to him. Marisol, though still healing, focused on giving Thomas stability. Then Emerson proposed something bold, a picnic, where both families could meet. Natalia, hesitant, agreed. At the park, she arrived with Tori snug against her chest. Emerson greeted her nervously beside Marisol, who held Thomas. It was awkward at first, but then the babies giggled, and the tension began to lift. The group sat on a blanket under the trees, exchanging small talk. For a moment, the scandal seemed distant. They were just parents with their children. By the end, Natalia and Marisol had shared a few smiles and even brief conversation. As dusk settled, they parted with polite goodbyes. Back at the estate, after tucking Tori into her crib, Natalia paused in the hallway. Emerson approached quietly. "Thank you," he said. "I did it for Tori," she replied, then added, "and maybe a little for Thomas too." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something real, a beginning. Months later, the media circus had quieted. The final court hearing arrived more formality than drama. Emerson, Marisol, and Natalia sat in the same courtroom one last time as the judge finalized custody terms and closed the case. Emerson was granted weekly visits with Thomas, and both sides agreed to a flexible schedule as he grew. In return, Marisol agreed not to speak publicly about the affair, protecting Thomas's future and Emerson's reputation. Natalia stood by Emerson's side not as a silent wife, but as a woman who had weathered public betrayal and still chose to show up for herself, for her daughter. Outside the courthouse, Emerson turned to Marisol. "Will you be okay?" She nodded, Thomas sleeping peacefully in a carrier. "I'm taking some college courses. I want to build something stable for him and for me." Emerson's voice softened. "I respect that, and I'll always be here for him." Marisol smiled faintly, then gave Natalia a quiet nod, less a goodbye, more an acknowledgement. Not friends, but no longer enemies. As the courtroom doors closed behind them, Emerson reached for Natalia's hand. "It's over." She squeezed his fingers. "It's over," she echoed, though both knew healing would take longer. Flashes from waiting photographers greeted them as they exited. This time, Natalia didn't flinch. She held her head high, not as a victim, but as a woman who had faced the storm and chosen her path forward. Yes, the mistress had brought her baby to court. Yes, the millionaire had looked away for too long. But now he looked at both his children and at the woman who had never stopped carrying the weight of truth. It wasn't the life they planned, but it was real, and it was theirs to rebuild. Every family has secrets, every relationship its trials, but true resilience is found in facing the hardest truths head-on. In the end, Emerson learned that wealth and power can't replace integrity or mend a broken heart. Natalia discovered a reservoir of inner strength that guided her through betrayal, heartbreak, and the birth of her daughter. And Marisol, once dismissed as the scheming mistress, emerged as a protective mother, determined to stand on her own feet. Their journey was a testament that life can be messy and painful, yet it can also offer second chances. If you found yourself moved by this story, by the lies, the drama, the hope, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Help us bring more riveting stories to light, because in every scandal, beneath every headline, there's a human heart searching for redemption and the courage to keep going. Thank you for watching.